My mother would say, the only reason you're here is because the hanger didn't work. Said, if there was really something wrong with your brain, I would have definitely opened up the window and put you on the windowsill and let you freeze.
There are legends whose lives begin with applause, with bright stages, with someone pointing and saying that one is special. Sylvester Stallone was not one of them. His story began with a scream that never fully formed in a delivery room where a doctor's mistake changed the course of a lifetime. A pair of surgical forceps slipped, tore a nerve in his face, and froze the lower left side of his mouth forever. Before he spoke his first word, the world had already marked him as different. Children can be cruel without meaning to be. They stared at the crooked smile, the uneven lips, the slurred speech. He learned early that some battles start before you even know you are fighting. His father raged through life with a temper that cracked like glass, striking out at the smallest mistake. His mother drifted between homes and ambitions, chasing a happiness that never stayed long enough. Together, they created a world where silence was safer than truth and where a young boy learned to disappear inside himself. He moved from school to school, never staying long enough to be remembered, always long enough to be judged. Classmates laughed at his voice. Teachers dismissed him as trouble. He grew up believing he was the kid no one would ever choose for anything that mattered. The boy whose face looked wrong. The boy who spoke wrong. The boy who would never fit. But pain, especially the quiet kind, has a way of planting seeds, and inside Stallone, something stubborn began to grow. A defiance that whispered, "You will not be forgotten." He started lifting weights not for glory, but for protection. He found comfort in movie theaters watching heroes who could do everything he could not. He copied their movements in front of a mirror, practicing lines with a mouth that refused to obey. Every word was a struggle, but every struggle was a step. Even then, he felt it deep inside, the strange conviction that life had placed him at the bottom for a reason. That if he ever climbed out, the world would have to listen. What he did not know yet was that the path ahead would not rise gently. It would drag him into darkness first. Into hunger, humiliation, and choices that would haunt him for decades. And the first of those choices was coming soon. Some stories turn on moments of triumph. Stallone's turned on a moment of hunger. Not the poetic kind. The real kind. The kind that tightens your stomach until you cannot stand up straight. The kind that makes you stare at strangers in restaurants and wonder what it feels like to finish a meal without counting coins. In the early 1970s, Stallone was living in New York, drifting from cheap room to cheaper room, chasing auditions that never gave him more than a closed door and a cold hallway. He had no money, no connections, no backup plan. There were nights he slept at the bus station because there was nowhere else to go. Days when he walked miles in winter cold just to save the price of a subway ride. He kept a notebook full of dreams, but his fridge stayed empty. And every time he looked in the mirror, he saw the same crooked smile that casting directors used as an excuse to turn him away. Then came the breaking point. His landlord demanded rent he could not pay. He had been evicted before. This time he had nothing left to sell. Nothing except his pride. Pride does not feed you. Pride does not warm you. Pride does not argue with reality. And reality was closing in. That was when he accepted the job he would spend decades avoiding in interviews. A low-budget softcore film called The Party at Kitty and Studs. 2 days of shooting. $200. Enough to survive a little longer. It was not glamour. It was not art. It was survival. He told himself it was temporary. He told himself it was necessary. But when the cameras rolled, a part of him cracked. Not because of the content, but because of what it represented. A moment where the world pushed him so far down, he agreed to disappear into a role he wished no one would ever see. And as if life wanted to test him one more time, a final heartbreak waited at the end of that same street. His dog Butkus, the one creature that stayed with him through every failure, needed food he could not afford. Stallone stood outside a liquor store and made the decision he still calls the lowest point of his life. He sold the dog for enough cash to keep himself alive. He walked away that day feeling like whatever pieces of hope he had left had been torn from him. But life has strange timing. Sometimes the universe waits until you are broken enough to listen. Because right after he hit the bottom, right after he traded his dignity for survival, something began to burn inside him. A story, a voice, a belief that he had one last fight left in him. And that fight would lead him to write a script that would change everything. There are turning points in life that do not arrive gently. They arrive like a punch. And for Sylvester Stallone, that punch came the night he watched a fight on television: Muhammad Ali versus Chuck Wepner, a champion against a man no one believed would last even a single round. But Wepner did not fall. He kept moving forward, bleeding, staggering, swinging, refusing to disappear. Stallone saw himself, not the champion, the man no one believed in. He went home, sat down at a battered desk in a tiny apartment he could barely afford, and began writing. The words came fast, almost faster than he could think. 3 straight days. Barely sleeping. Barely eating. Driven by something he could not name but could feel in every breath. When he finished, he held in his hands a script called Rocky. A story about an underdog who gets one chance. A story about a nobody who decides he will not stay a nobody. A story that looked a lot like his own reflection. Producers wanted the script immediately. They offered money he had never seen in his life. But there was a condition. They did not want him to play Rocky. They wanted a known actor. Someone clean. Someone polished. Someone without a crooked mouth or a broken voice. Stallone had nothing. No home. No job. No dog. No stability. But he had one line he repeated every time a bigger offer came. "You can buy the script, but I play Rocky." Executives laughed. Others walked away. The price kept rising. 100,000, 150, 200. He still refused. Stubbornness can destroy a man, but sometimes it saves him. At last, a small studio agreed to let him star. The budget was tiny. The risks were enormous. The doubts were loud. But Stallone stepped onto that set like a man walking into the only door the universe had ever opened for him. And then came the moment that proved destiny has a strange sense of humor. After the deal was done, after the cameras were ready, he walked back to the same liquor store where he had sold his dog. He stood outside for 3 days waiting for the man who bought Butkus. When the man finally appeared, Stallone begged to buy the dog back. The man refused. Stallone raised the price again and again until the man gave in. Rocky got his dog back, and America got the most iconic pet cameo in boxing movie history. When Rocky premiered in 1976, nobody expected anything, but the film exploded, winning 3 Academy Awards, including Best Picture. The world finally listened to the voice casting directors once dismissed, the face critics once mocked. The underdog had risen, but success is not a finish line. It is a doorway, and behind that doorway waited storms Stallone never saw coming. Fame looks bright from far away. Up close, it burns. After Rocky, after the Oscars, after the world finally learned to pronounce his name without hesitation, Sylvester Stallone walked straight into a new kind of battlefield. This time, it was not the streets of Philadelphia or a boxing ring. It was his own home. His first marriage, already strained by years of poverty, now struggled under the weight of sudden superstardom. Travel, film sets, interviews, nights away, temptations everywhere. And success does not just change schedules. It changes people. It changes expectations. It changes the distance between two hearts that once shared the same dream. Then came the relationship that detonated everything. Janice Dickinson, supermodel, icon, known for beauty and chaos in equal measure. Rumors swirled. The tabloids circled. And Stallone, caught between fame and emotion, stepped deeper into a connection he did not fully control. Jennifer Flavin, young, grounded, loyal, had been standing quietly by his side for years. She believed in him when few did. But in 1994, she opened her door to a FedEx envelope. Inside was a 6-page letter. Stallone's handwriting. Stallone's signature. Stallone's decision to end everything. 6 pages to end a relationship. 6 pages to explain that Janice might be carrying his child. 6 pages to walk away from a woman who had waited for him through the worst years and the best years. Except the universe was not done turning the knife. A DNA test later proved the baby was not his. The relationship with Janice collapsed, and the letter that ended a love story became one of the most infamous breakups in Hollywood. Stallone admitted years later that the letter was cowardly, that he hurt someone who did not deserve it. That fame had blinded him in ways he never expected. But the damage was done, and the world was watching, eager to see whether Stallone's personal life would crumble the same way so many action heroes do on screen. Jennifer eventually forgave him. They rebuilt, they married, they raised children. A rare Hollywood reunion that seemed to promise peace. But peace in Stallone's life never lasted long, because just when he thought he had overcome the chaos of fame and forgiven himself for the mistakes of youth, a far darker tragedy was already approaching. A tragedy no father can ever prepare for. There are blows in life that no training can prepare you for. Not boxing, not fame, not success, nothing. On a quiet July day in 2012, Sylvester Stallone received the kind of news that splits a man's life into before and after. His eldest son, Sage Stallone, 36 years old, talented, sensitive, always searching, was found lifeless in his Los Angeles home. The headlines arrived fast. The speculation arrived faster. Hollywood has never been kind to the vulnerable, and it was not about to change now. Rumors exploded across every tabloid: overdose, rehab, addiction, self-destruction. But none of it was true. The autopsy revealed a different story. A quieter one. A human one. Sage died from coronary artery disease, a severe blockage in his heart. No illegal drugs, no overdose, nothing that fit the cruel narrative the media tried to force on him. Yet truth rarely moves as quickly as gossip, and Stallone had to grieve under the harshest spotlight in the world, watching strangers dissect the life of a son they had never met. Sage was not just a headline. He was the boy who sat beside Stallone while he wrote scripts. The kid who kept drawings of his father's movie sets. The young man who stood next to him in Rocky V, playing the role of Rocky's son, a role so painfully real now that it feels like a prophecy nobody wanted. Stallone withdrew from the world. Friends said he spoke less, slept less, ate almost nothing. People saw the muscles, the fame, the legacy. But behind it all was a father broken in ways no camera could capture. He pleaded with the press. He begged them to stop. "Please respect my wonderful son's memory," he said. A simple sentence, but the kind that carries 1,000 unspoken screams. Fame had taken many things from Stallone before. His privacy, his peace, his reputation during scandals. But Sage's death was different. It was the one blow he could not block, the one enemy he could not defeat. And just when he tried to stand again, when he began piecing his life together after losing his son, the world reminded him that grief does not protect you from judgment, because the next storm waiting for him was one he accidentally invited with his own hands. Pain does not pause for anyone, not even for a grieving father. And while the world still whispered about Sage, another headline rose to the surface. A headline Stallone never expected to see with his name attached. In early 2007, during a promotional trip to Australia, airport officers stopped him at customs. They inspected his bags. Then they pulled out dozens of small vials, 48 bottles of a substance banned in the country, human growth hormone, a brand called gintropin, strictly controlled, illegal to import. It was the kind of discovery that instantly creates a scandal, the kind that ignites cameras, talk shows, and moral debates overnight. For decades, Stallone had been the symbol of the impossible physique, the proof that grit could overpower genetics, and now the world wanted to believe it was all artificial. He could have denied everything. He could have blamed a doctor. He could have blamed ignorance. He could have tried to hide behind lawyers and silence, but he did not. In court, in front of the press, he admitted he had used it. He said he relied on human growth hormone to prepare for the brutal physical demands of the new Rambo film. He explained that it helped repair muscles, helped his aging body survive 12-hour shoots, helped him keep up with the character the world still expected him to be. Some people appreciated the honesty. Others accused him of cheating. For days, magazines and networks squeezed every drop of outrage they could from the story. But Stallone remained steady. He apologized for bringing the hormone into Australia. He paid the fines, and he refused to hide his truth. Growing older in Hollywood is an invisible war. The public demands the body of a young man from someone who has lived through decades of injuries, stunts, and punishing roles. Stallone had cracked ribs, torn muscles, nerve damage, and joints that no longer bent the way they used to. He did what he thought he needed to do to stay standing. Still, the damage was done. His name had been dragged through another public storm, and the internet, hungry for drama, refused to let go. But scandals come and go. What hurt him more was something deeper, something most fans never knew until years later. A betrayal, not of health or legality, but of authorship. A wound that did not bleed but still cut the deepest. Because while Stallone was battling the expectations of age, he uncovered another truth. One that would ignite a fight far longer than any he ever played on screen. There's a special kind of pain reserved for creators. It is not physical. It is not public. It is the pain of watching the very thing you built, your sweat, your sacrifice, your soul, belong to someone else. For decades, the world believed Rocky was Stallone's. His script, his story, his face, his legacy. But behind the scenes, another truth had been quietly growing. A truth that would eventually explode into one of the most bitter conflicts in modern Hollywood. Back in 1976, when Stallone was broke and desperate, he signed a contract that gave the producer Irwin Winkler and his partners near total ownership of the Rocky franchise. At the time, it felt like salvation, a doorway into existence, a chance to be seen. But as the years passed, as Rocky became a cultural monument, as sequels were made, as billions of dollars moved through the franchise, Stallone realized something devastating. He had no stake in any of it. No ownership. No control. no share of the empire his own brain and heart had created. He carried the franchise on his back. He bled for it. He broke bones for it. He turned a 30-page script into a global phenomenon, and yet the legal rights belonged to someone else. For a long time, he stayed quiet. He tried to make peace with it. He told himself gratitude mattered more than resentment. But silence has a limit. And his limit arrived when the Creed films revived the franchise in a new era, films built on the mythology he had created, but still owned entirely by the same producers who controlled Rocky from the beginning. Stallone finally spoke publicly. He called the situation heartbreaking. He said he deserved at least a piece of what he created. Fans rallied behind him. Hollywood flinched. Then the conflict deepened. He posted artwork portraying Irwin Winkler as a serpent. He accused the producers of hoarding rights. He said he had been excluded from critical decisions. And when Creed 3 was announced without him, his frustration became impossible to hide. He was not asking for billions. He was not demanding control. He was asking for something simpler, something emotional, something human: acknowledgement, ownership, a place in the story he created. But Hollywood contracts do not care about emotion, and legacy is rarely protected by sentiment. The world saw a superstar, but beneath the muscles and the fame was a man wounded by the knowledge that his greatest creation belonged more to paperwork than to him. It was a betrayal without a villain, a tragedy without a funeral. And just when Stallone tried to navigate the fallout of this fight, another blow struck, this time in the one place he believed had finally become safe. Because the next rupture would not come from a studio or a courtroom. It would come from his own home. For years, it seemed like Sylvester Stallone had finally found his calm. A wife who grounded him. 3 daughters who adored him. A home untouched by scandal. A quiet chapter after a lifetime of storms. Jennifer Flavin had been with him through the highs, the lows, and the scandals he wished he could erase. She forgave him when others would not. She rebuilt a life with him when most people would have walked away. Together, they raised Sophia, Sistine, and Scarlett, a trio the media affectionately called the Stallone sisters, radiant and confident, each one a piece of the peace he thought he had earned. Then came 2022. A filing in a Florida courthouse. A word no one expected. Dissolution. Jennifer requested to end their marriage after 25 years together. But it was the details that caught the world's attention. She accused Stallone of dissipation of marital assets, a clinical legal phrase that suggested he had been irresponsible with their shared wealth. She asked the court to give her exclusive control of their $35 million Palm Beach estate while the divorce was processed. And then came the image that sent the internet into a frenzy. Stallone covered his shoulder tattoo of Jennifer's face. In its place, he inked the head of a bull mastiff. The tabloids spun it as revenge, as symbolism, as proof of a marriage collapsing under ego clashes, financial tension, and unresolved wounds from the past. Stallone stayed silent at first. When he finally spoke, his voice carried the weight of a man trying not to break again. He insisted there was no betrayal, no scandal, no villain. Just 2 people overwhelmed by years of pressures from careers, from family, from the slow erosion that happens when life moves faster than love can keep up. But behind the statements, behind the headlines, behind the clipped interviews, there was a man terrified of losing the one sanctuary he had left. And then, unexpectedly, the story shifted. Just a few weeks after the divorce filing, they paused everything. Meetings behind closed doors, long conversations, tears, rebuilding, reconsidering, and suddenly the impossible became true. Jennifer withdrew the divorce request. The couple reconciled, No dramatic press conferences, no stage declarations. Just two people who realized that walking away would hurt more than staying and fixing what time had strained. For Stallone, it was a reminder that even the toughest lives still bend toward hope. That the man who had been beaten down by childhood poverty, scandal, and grief still had something worth fighting for, something no award could replace. And so, in the final act of his life, Stallone stands not just as an icon, not just as a survivor, but as a man who carries every scar without apology. A man still learning, still rising, still refusing to let the world decide the ending for him. Because if his journey has proven anything, it is this: some fighters are made in the ring, others are made in the dark. Stallone was made in both.